Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're just going to wait just a moment as people start to join in. Great. So I think I'm going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Green, and I am Director of Development at RioCan. I'm also co-chair of the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition, or the AAC, which ULI Toronto supports as the Secretariat. And for those in our community with sight loss, I am a white female with brown hair. So before we get into today's program, we will begin with a land acknowledgement. As a Toronto region-based organization, ULI Toronto acknowledges that the lands we are meeting on virtually is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. ULI Toronto stands in solidarity with Indigenous communities demanding action and accountability on the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. We'd like to also acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, particularly descendants from those who were brought here through enslavement. ULI Toronto has been supporting the industry on the path to truth and reconciliation and will be launching a new resource guide for actions at its Meet the Chief Planners event on April 2nd. So today's event and all other ULI Toronto programming would, of course, not be possible without the support of ULI's annual sponsors. And I'd like to thank all sponsors, as now more than ever, ULI Toronto relies on the support to put on high quality programs and to drive our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impacts in communities worldwide. So to all of our sponsors, thank you. So just over 2 years ago, ULI Toronto supported the launch of the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition. This is a pioneering community of 77 development and accessibility leaders, as well as civic organizations, who share a vision for a more accessible Canada. Through tours, tools, and relationship building, the coalition is making accessibility a greater priority when developers are building the millions of new homes that Canada needs in the next decade. The coalition was created to address the fact that the vast majority of today's homes do not meet the needs of people with disabilities and aging Canadians, which is in large part due to the limited accessibility features required in the building code. And because of that, many developers do not know that there's a problem, let alone an opportunity. So this coalition of the willing is giving developers the cost-effective know-how, empathy, and motivation to design beyond the building code and to make homes more habitable and visitable and make a real difference in people's choices and lives. And we've now reached a new milestone. The Daniels Corporation has just publicly released its Accessibility Design Program, or ADP, their technical standards guide for mid and high-rise multi-residential homes. And Penguin Living has published its design and cost research for the accessible low-rise apartments that they've been building. We want all developers, builders, architects, and designers to be informed and inspired by this unprecedented sharing of competitive information by two industry leaders. So I'll introduce the moderator and speakers for today's webinar in a moment, but first, to set the stage, we wanted to play a video called A Tale of Two Homes, Bridging the Gap to Deliver Accessible Homes for Everyone. It's produced by ULI Toronto and Daniels with Confound Films and funded by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation under the National Housing Strategy Demonstrations Initiative. Thank you to collaborators StopGap Foundation and Access Now, and to the participants, Luke Anderson, Nisha Mitchell, Kate Chung, Doug Buck, and Jay Cohen. You could also watch this video in a variety of formats on ULI Toronto's YouTube channel, a link for which is in the chat and can be shared with colleagues and partners. We'd also love to get your thoughts on the video after watching it. So if you could take a few minutes to fill out a survey that will also be linked in the chat. So here we go with the video.
We've asked this group to think about the things that might be more challenging or what might restrict them from purchasing or renting a home like this from an accessibility standpoint. We're then going to ask the same group to take a tour of a unit that has been designed with accessibility in mind. It's from a collection of the Daniels Accessibility designed units, and we're going to ask for their feedback to compare the two units that they've toured.
Right. I'm just noting the absence of a power-operated door, and I'm going to enter here. Just going to check out the bathroom here to my right. Tight squeeze. All right. So it's the standard door width, which is a little tight for me. So I'm not going to be able to spin around in here, so turning circle for me is not going to happen. I need a wheel-in style shower, so bathtub would not work so well for me.
Oh, there is a bit of a lift here, which would be challenging for me. Everything in here is white. Yeah, it's really hard to tell the difference, the contrast between the shower, the wall.
The bathtub should be a shower, a wheel-in shower.
Okay, so what I'm noticing is a fairly tight space between the island and the countertop and stove area, high cupboard spaces, or under sink clearance for someone using a chair. Doesn't appear to be a part of this design. This is a space that I wouldn't try to party in.
No lights under here. Be nice if there was a light under here that we could switch on and off. That way I could, have a bit more light to see what I'm preparing, to see what I'm doing, and to clean up any messes.
This is very tight here. Very, very hard for arthritic hands to manage these things.
Right, just gonna check out the bedroom here. I'd like to park my chair beside the bed when I'm getting help out of my chair and into bed. So that, just imagining that being a challenge for me. I'm a big fan of sunsets. Even more wonderful if I were to be able to experience them out on the balcony. There's quite the ledge. So I won't be able to get out there.
I was not using my cane. This would be a big problem. I could definitely see myself tripping. And when you're in your home, you don't use your cane.
Let's see if I can climb over.
Is it nice out there?
Haha, you can't get out on the balcony at all.
Haha, you won't be able to get in.
You're gonna lock me out, are you? Okay.
Overall, it may be somewhat visitable, but definitely not a place that I would choose to live.
The layout of the unit is really nice. However, there are some accessibility features that I'll definitely need to change.
It simply would be very depressing for me to live in, and I could not get into the shower. Just would not work.
The current building code, unfortunately, doesn't quite go far enough in terms of thinking about accessibility. There are small things that can be done in buildings across the city on a consistent basis that won't cost more money, that won't be more difficult to build, but will lead to a better quality of life.
Noticing a lot of room to maneuver. Feels very spacious. Lowered light switches. Just noting the underneath clearance of the counter here, which will work well for some people that use mainly manual wheelchairs. They sit a little lower than power chair users. They have a dance party in here. Kitchen dance party. I'm always up for a kitchen dance party.
A lot of light in here. This is wonderful. So the outlet is a contrasting color from the backsplash. So that's really good. So I could easily find the outlets. I like how the elements, there's a contrast with the elements. So that's really good. Dots here. So I'm able to start to select the numbers and hit start.
This is way better kitchen than at the other place.
Right. Let's check out the bathroom. And lots of clearance to get through. A great layout. Almost 360 turn without a whole lot of maneuvering to allow myself to spin completely around.
This bathroom is very spacious, lots of light, which I like. And you just walk right in. That's awesome. So I don't have to worry about tripping.
A wheel-in shower.
Mm-hmm. Can I have a little privacy, please?
I'm imagining this being a great spot to enjoy a meal in the sunshine. This is an experience that I don't tend to have many of, being able to get from the indoor space to the outdoor space to enjoy time on the balcony.
There's no step up, so it makes it easier to get in and out. So that is really good.
Very low threshold, easy to go over with a walker.
The time to start building and developing these accessible homes is today. We need developers and builders to take this up right now and start delivering more homes that have more accessible features.
I was really imagining hosting and having guests over and there still being ample room to maneuver. And I felt like I was home.
This unit is very accessible.
My favorite features in this unit are the shower, which is so easy to get into, and the balcony. I can actually get out on the balcony.
This unit's equipped with an automatic door opener. It's very easy to use. Door opens, and I'm out of here.
Okay, fantastic. So just a reminder to fill out the link survey in the chat when you have a moment on the video. So I'd like to introduce who is here with us today. Luke Anderson will be the moderator and will also speak to the why we need to build more accessible housing. Luke is my fellow co-chair of the coalition and executive director of StopGap Foundation. We'll also hear from 3 other speakers to dig deep into the issue with us today. Lorene Casiez from Human Space will set the stage as to what the current situation is and what voluntary standards and certifications exist for developers to do better. Marco Chow from the Daniels Corporation will walk you through his company's newly published Accessibility Technical Standards Guide. And Guy Solomon from Penguin Living will share his design and cost research for low-rise apartments that he's been renovating and building. All of our speakers will be further introduced in the chat to save time. Feel free to use the Q&A function to ask any questions of the speakers. And with that, we'll ask Luke to get us started on why we need more housing that is more accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Heidi. Hi, everybody. Thanks for enjoying your lunch with us. My name is Luke Anderson. I'm a mid-40s white male with cinnamon sugar beard and toque hair. I'm wearing a denim shirt with red and black plaid shoulders. Independence, choice, spontaneity, connection, predictability, consistency, affordability, reassurance, trust, stability, comfort, safety, relaxation, ease, harmony, appreciation, belonging, participation, community, consideration, inclusion, to be known, to be seen, to be understood, and last but certainly not least, kitchen dance parties. These are some of our fundamental needs as humans. Because of inadequate design of built spaces, many people, and I'm going to get into the numbers shortly, don't experience having these needs met. For so many people, including myself, their home and homes they visit or would like to visit simply don't meet these needs. Dependability, discomfort, disconnection, insecurity, unaffordability, exclusion, misunderstood, not seen. This is the living experience many Canadians in their homes and more broadly navigating built spaces in their communities and beyond. If you could pull up the slides for me, please, that would be great. We've pulled some stats to support what I've just shared. The proportion of Canadians 65 plus with disabilities, that being 7.3 million, or about 19% of Canadians. This could reach 20% this year, 25% by 2059, 27%. So roughly over a quarter of Canadians have one or more disabilities. Next slide. So Toronto is home to 476,000 seniors and 570,000 people with disabilities. And when you put those two numbers together, that totals about a third of Toronto's total population. 42% of Toronto seniors over 65 indicated that they had one or more disabilities. Next slide. So there's an overwhelming majority of older adults, that being over 85%, would prefer to age in place, so within their homes and communities. 2/3 of Canadians are concerned about future mobility challenges. And 53% want Canada-wide standards for universal access. Next slide. We're going to get into the specifics about how there is little to no additional cost to incorporate accessibility into built spaces. Things like single lever hardware faucets, roll-in showers, light switches and power outlet heights, offset plumbing under sinks. So people who are using mobility aids don't bump their knees up against plumbing and hot drainage piping, stacked closets that can be converted into elevator shafts, color contrasting, low profile thresholds like the example that we saw in the video, and lowered peepholes. Things that cost next to nothing. Next slide. For features that do cost more, they typically add up to less than 1% of the overall project budget, and that's coming in from multiple sources. This number is being reflected broadly across multiple studies, including the 2020 Rick Hansen Foundation study, which found that the average construction cost increase to achieve Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certified gold standard with a score of at least 80% is estimated to be less than an additional 1%, that being 0.4% for high-rise residential or 1.8% for affordable housing projects. Okay, next slide. The developer's sample cost estimate for a rental building shows that the costs per unit are negligibly higher, that being 0.49%, to incorporate accessibility measures that go beyond the building code in 15% of the suites and interior and exterior common areas. Right. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to pass it back over to Heidi, who's going to, or no, I'm going to introduce Lorene.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. Nice to see some familiar names in the chat, so welcome. I have the next 5 minutes to talk to you about the exciting topic of accessibility legislation, better practice, and some voluntary standards. Certainly just, these are not all of them, but some of the key ones that are being talked about today. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So what you're seeing on the screen here are 3 turning circles. One dimensioned at 2,500, one at 2,300, and one at 2,100. In a research study completed in 2010, by the Center for Inclusive Design and Environmental Access, when they looked at the typical dimensions of mobility devices in North America, they found at 2,500, 95% of people using manual, so the smallest type of mobility device, to the largest mobility device, scooters, was able to make that 360-degree turn. So sort of ease of navigation in the built environment. And as that space that turning circle progressively got smaller and smaller, fewer and fewer people could make that turn. I'm gonna ask anyone on the call if they have any idea of what the number that's referenced in the building code for a turning circle. Feel free to, if you're so brave, to put in the chat. For those of you who aren't aware, the turning circle numbers that are referenced in the building code is anywhere from 1,700 in universal washrooms to 1,500 in places like vestibules and the accessible stall. And what this study found was at 1,500, just under 50% of people using manual wheelchairs were unable to do the turn. So it really reinforces the need to look beyond the building code. So certainly, a lot of architects and designers on this call are like, oh my gosh, 2,500 turning circles. I'm not suggesting that goes everywhere, just suggesting that there's more to be done than what's identified in building codes. If you move to the next slide, please. I'm going to give a snapshot of accessibility legislation. Some of you may have heard the development of the Accessible Canada Act, the ACA. So this is applicable to buildings under federal jurisdiction. And there certainly are a series of standards under development or out for public review, one of which I'll touch on shortly. Within Ontario, there's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the AODA. The Design of Public Spaces Standard has specific requirements for the built environment, the Ontario Building Code, and municipal standards. Move to the next slide, please. And so what I'm showing here are sort of the interlay, the relationship between sort of key pieces of legislation in Ontario. So on the left-hand side is the Ontario Human Rights Code. To be clear, there are no specific requirements to the built environment. Really, the Ontario Human Rights Code is sort of this overarching code, the code that has supremacy, the code that says we shall not discriminate against people with disabilities. It doesn't exactly tell you how to do so, but certainly the expectation is that we don't. And so as you moved into sort of the next column, the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, this is a a broader provincial act. It has various standards in integrated accessibility regulation, general requirements. So looking at things like transportation and communication. But I imagine for those on the call, the design of public spaces standard is the one that's most applicable to us in our work in the built environment. The one key thing I'd like to highlight here is that the AODA, for the most part, under the design of public spaces standard, is applicable to exterior spaces, spaces not connected to the building. So when people tell me they want an AODA toilet, I'm always a little bit puzzled as what they're asking for. And the next sort of column is the Ontario Building Code. Section 3.8 highlights the barrier-free requirements, but typically very limited in what it applies to, but certainly limited to Part 3, so sort of larger buildings, and limited to designing for people. You know, if you look at the spatial requirements, limited to designing for people using smaller mobility devices, very, very limited requirements for people with low vision, for people who are blind, some requirements for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and almost nothing related to anyone who may be neurodivergent. So really relying on better practices and voluntary standards, which a good chunk of our chat will be today, will help us design better. Next slide, please. So highlighting a few more here. So the RHFAC certification, accessible ready housing, draft standard, CMHC's universal design. I think the contributing members of that particular standard are on the call. Nice to see you. And the 2 CSA B651 standards. So I'll just run through these very, very quickly. Next slide, please. So the CMHC Universal Design Standard, provides an introduction to universal design, provides items to consider, provides some dimensions, but not all. And, it is referenced in a lot of the federal financial incentive programs for multi-unit residential buildings. Next slide, please. When thinking about a voluntary standard, one of them is the RHFAC rating. This is a framework to measure meaningful access in the built environment. It's a certification process. A lot of individuals and groups like this because at the end you get a plaque and a sticker that you can put on your window, similar to WELL or a green building standard, and you can clearly identify to the public that you've received RHFAC rating, which indicates some degree of accessibility. Within this particular survey, there is a reference to CSA B651. Next slide, please. You may have heard of the accessible ready housing. So this is part of the federal ACA set of standards that are coming out. It's a framework to help develop housing that can be easily modified to be accessible in the future. Again, points back to CSA B651. And so I'll end, next slide, please. End on saying perhaps, if you're looking for better practices, some key leading ones, all roads lead to CSA B651 and B652 in the reference standards. There's a series of technical requirements and specific dimensions. And as noted earlier, it's referenced in the National Building Code, RHFAC, and the CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation funding incentives. And so before I hand it over to my colleagues, Daniel, the Daniels program and Penguin Living, I'd like to move to the next slide just to emphasize how important the work that they're doing is. As some of you may know, the minimum requirements for accessible housing in Ontario, so the Part 3, that Part 3 building, so the apartments and condos and rental, you're looking at, designing for 15% of the unit, the ability to get into the unit, access into one bedroom, kitchen, living, a 1500 turning circle, and wall reinforcement for future installation of grab bars. And as you move to Part 9, someone asked me earlier, well, where are the requirements for Part 9 for these homes? Well, there aren't any. So with this, I'll hand it over to Marco and Guy to share sort of the great work that they've been doing in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorene. Hi, everyone. My name is Marco Chow. I'm from the Daniels Corporation. My pronouns are he, him, and I am of Chinese descent with short black hair. Today, I'm wearing a white dress shirt and a black jacket, and glasses. So today, I'm very happy to be part of the conversation and just to share the Daniels Accessibility Design Program, and what this is all about. So next slide. These are the 4 things I'd like to highlight. The first being what is ADP, where you can access the technical standards that we've just released earlier last week. A common question that comes up, which is what is the difference between barrier-free suites and an ADP suite? And then finally, how to actually use the ADP technical standards. And we'll go over a few of the sections in the guidelines so that you can take a look at how you can actually implement that. Next slide. So at Daniels, our commitment is to aspire towards creating universally designed communities for people of all abilities, and this is hugely important. Through our journey, we've collaborated with accessibility professionals and leaders, many of which are on the call today, and we developed what's called the Accessibility Designed Program, or ADP for short. And this includes a number of accessible design features that we believe should be implemented and baked into the suite, as well as the common area design of our projects straight from day one. The features noted in this program look to accommodate a wide range of accessibility needs, and this includes mobility, but also vision loss, hearing loss, intellectual and cognitive disabilities, reduced dexterity, as well as enabling aging in place. Previously, the ADP technical standards were used internally for us as a design guide for our consultants, our partners, as well as the internal team members, but we're very excited to be sharing this to the larger community. Next slide. The program was created back in 2017 when within our organization and speaking to our purchasers, we found that we wanted to address a shortfall in the supply of new housing that was truly accessible. As we've talked about before, in this webinar, ADP looks to go above and beyond the minimums that are listed out in the Ontario Building Code. And we want to provide a complement of accessible design features to our purchasers, our homeowners, and our tenants at no additional cost. So all of the new Daniels high-rise condominium, as well as our purpose-built rental communities, primarily within the high-rise and the mid-rise realm, include ADP suites, as well as the common area features, to ensure that we have a constant pipeline of accessible homes moving forward. And the goal here really is to ensure that we're enabling those to be able to have autonomy in the way that they live in their homes and the ability to age in place. Next slide. So this is the cover of our ADP technical standards, and I've provided here a link to where you can download this for free at danielshome.ca under the Daniels ADP section. Next slide. So the common question that we get all the time is, what is the difference, Marco, between OBC barrier-free suites and an ADP suite? So the ADP suite is considered a subset of the minimum 15% barrier-free suites required, meaning that in the eyes of the city, they are considered barrier-free, but there's additional features that go above and beyond the requirements set in OBC. And so typically on each of our projects, we strive to provide a diverse range of ADP suite layouts from 1 bedrooms all the way to 3 bedrooms, although the exact suite count and the overall percentage is typically determined on a project by project basis. Next slide. Okay, so diving into one of the first sections of the technical standards, which is the ADP suite layouts. So on the left, I've just shown a sample page of the suite layout section from the guidelines. And then on the right, just showing a blown up image of the floor plan. And a few notable features you'll see here is the power door operator rough-in at the suite entry, as well as at the swing out balcony door. There's wider door frames at 965 millimeters wide, as well as a number of kind of larger clearances within the bathroom, the bedrooms, and a side-by-side washer dryer. Next slide. Another key section within the technical standards is looking at the accessible kitchen, which is a key area within the suite itself. On the left, we're showing a rendering of what a typical ADP accessible kitchen would look like. And then on the right, we have 2 pictures of real photos of an ADP accessible kitchen that's been built out at one of our rental communities. So a few notable features that you can see on the right-hand side pictures would include a side opening wall oven, a drawer dishwasher that you can see in the image to the furthest to the right, as well as roll under clearance below the countertop and an induction cooktop that can be seen at the top. Next slide. These are some sample pages of the kitchen design section within the technical standards. And you can see here that there's written descriptions for all of the requirements in terms of features and clearances, as well as specs for appliances. And then on the page on the right, you can see that there's a floor plan for the kitchen layout, as well as elevations and dimensions and specifications around the kitchen island as well. Next slide. And then we're moving on to the accessible bathroom as another kind of key component of the technical standards. So again, showing on the left-hand side a rendering of what the space could look like. And then on the right-hand side, an example of our project in Erin Mills, where we're showing photos of the ADP accessible bathroom. So a few things to note here would be the roll under clearance below the vanity in the sink, a roll in shower with no threshold between tile on the inside of the shower and the outside. There's a fold-down seat within the shower itself. And finally, a recessed kind of hidden tile drain that acts as a secondary way to kind of collect and pool any excess water that may run off from the shower. Next slide. And here showing some sample pages as well, just to give you a flavor of what the bathroom design section looks like in terms of floor plans, sections, images, as well as text. Slide. So we've talked a lot about what happens within the ADP suite itself, but the ADP program goes beyond the suites to then cover common areas, the amenities, the underground, the lockers, etc. So here are some sample pages just demonstrating some of the equipment that we would like to see in the fitness amenity, for an example, as well as some features around the signage and the wayfinding. So in the image that you can see on the right, we're denoting signage that's typically embossed with high contrast and including Braille directly below the numbering itself. Next slide. And the last section of the ADP technical standards, what we've done is compiled a series of checklists. And what this allows us to do is to ensure that all of the technical requirements and details are incorporated and caught within the project itself. The checklist is also organized in a way where each respective design consultant who is responsible for each kind of individual item is then kind of tallied out within a comprehensive matrix. I should note as well that the ADP program for us, especially within our condominium tenure, really serves as a baseline upon which we can start to have conversations with a potential purchaser, just recognizing that accessibility isn't something that can be fully resolved with a checklist necessarily, but it is meant to be something that you continually work at because each individual person has a very particular way that they would like to live in their home. And as home builders, it's very important for us to be able to cater to those needs. Next slide. We're excited as well to kind of bring all of this work that we've done around high-rise and low-rise and ADP towards our low-rise communities as well. And we're currently in the kind of working drawings process of bringing some of these suites online. So really looking forward to sharing that when that is ready. And on the next slide, we'll conclude here. So feel free to reach out to us at the Daniels Corp with any questions you have around the technical standards as you're reviewing them. We're very happy to sit down and unpack anything in further detail, as well as to receive any feedback that you guys may have. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Guy to talk a little bit more about the low-rise realm of accessibility.
Hello, everyone. My name is Guy Solomon. I'm a white male wearing a white rain jacket because today it's raining outside. Thank you very much for having me. And Marco, thanks for the handoff. I'll quickly go over what we've been able to do. Quickly introducing our company. Penguin Living is a real estate developer in low-rise. We started off by working on infill lots. To date, we've built about 23 suites of accessibility. Worked diligently on creating some standards that weren't always available to us. And in my last presentation, I explained a little bit about the various rooms that we can establish for universal design. So we shared a kitchen, we shared a washroom, we shared best practices. All those slides are available as part of this presentation, as well as keeping the cost to as close to zero as possible. My presentation before was really about cost considerations so that it becomes feasible and accessible to continue to grow from where we started. And it's wonderful to see the presentations where, some of the design principles are adopted, or at this point, probably ahead of where we were at. But as long as we can share and consolidate all of our learnings and keep moving the industry forward, I think that would be, that's ideal. So what I'll do is on the next slide, our company is working towards changing the landscape of how these homes are being built. So last presentation, and it's like I said, all the slides are available in this forum. Last presentation was about working within the inside of the unit. And there was a lot of conversation about working on the outside of the unit. Now that we're building new construction residences, both low-rise and now mid-rise, for accessibility, the conversation in low-rise about how to get in is really the next step in the process. So as we have highly accessible units, with respect to navigating the interior space, the simple question is, well, what is impeding us in low-rise? And so it's really only 2 slides that I have to share. The rest of it is what I've already done, and we can have that in Q&A. And one of the things that I've done is I always share my cell phone number. So it's available to everyone to text me, call me, and some of you have taken advantage of that, and I welcome it at all times. So next slide, please. Or is that is in my control? So I'll speak to the particular issue of grading on the next slide. As you'll see, we already have kitchens and washrooms and things of that nature. So when you walk into any home in any subdivision, the idea would be there's a certain amount of slope of the grass to get to your front door. So the minimum slope that most municipalities accept, from my understanding, is about 2%. While having a 2% slope, meaning the curb or the sidewalk has to be 2% lower than the front door, what we're looking for is the understanding that without any guards or rails, usually to make it accessible, you can still be at around 5%. So as long as your grading, wherever you set your home is on the particular accessible home, is less than 5%, you should be able to make an entryway getting into the main floor of any structure without an issue. So if you think of your conventional residential product, not so much what's on the screen, but a subdivision home with a garage, townhouse, you name it. If we can get in, so sometimes builders like myself prefer, a 10 centimeter or 4-inch lip at the front of the door. They call it a sill, so that the snow buildup or water buildup can drain back away from the house. The idea would be if you have to set it at about 5%, a parking spot is typically about 19, 20 feet. If you do have a parking spot on the way to your garage, which is quite common, you would have an idea that you can set that up where you can go up in elevation by about 1 foot. And with only 4 inches being grade and maybe another 4 inches being the natural slope, there's a world where that can be married together, and every home can essentially be done this way. There are some foundation methods that we can talk about separately, engineering, where the floor system does not have to sit right on top of the concrete. It can sit within the concrete, again, making sure that it's accessible and lower and still protected from the elements on the outside. And I can get into that separately, individually later. And so that's the first element, is getting in. And so when we talk about most low-rise infill developments, there's always more than one level. There could be 2, there could be 3, there could even be 4. So the idea would be is If you can clear the garage in a typical setting where there's a garage, you'll have more space, whether your radius is 1.5 meters or 2.5 meters, whatever the goal is. You'll have more space to circle and then enter the elevator and migrate your way up and down the home. So just those two elements is what I wanted to add to today's presentation, leaving enough time for Q&A for all the panelists, which is we already know how to navigate our way through the inside of a unit. Daniels has done a fantastic job with that design. Looks similar to what we've done. You could take elements of that with the cost-cutting measures and the supply chain that we shared in the further slides. And now we talk about getting in. There should be no reason if your grading is less than 5%, which is common to get in. And then if you set your elevator behind the garage, you'll have ample space to design accordingly. So those two design principles, when you think of custom homes, it's largely recommended to start with your kitchen and then build your way out. Well, in accessibility, you build to your elevator access, you build to your grading, and then everything else should fall into place, especially with low rise where you have a bit more square footage to work with. So that was the premise of what I wanted to share today. And I look forward to the question and answers.
Wonderful, Guy. Really appreciate your generosity and your passion and for this important work. And thank you, Lorene and Marco, again for your work. This important challenge that we are working to solve and contribute to. Really acknowledging your work and your organization's contributions to this. We've got our Q&A open for questions. Please do drop your questions in the chat. We'll field them with the time that we have left. But I guess while you're chewing on your questions, I would love to ask all of you what the first step is. The first step developers can take if they want to go beyond the building code to make the homes that they build more accessible. We've got these voluntary standards, which we've noted are challenging to navigate and choose from, can be a little bit overwhelming if we're just beginning our journey. I'd just like to, if you could, just quickly describe where a developer might begin. Guy, you want to kick it off? Just a quick answer to that one to support our audience that's joined us here today.
Absolutely. If we're speaking of really any suite, all the design principles are in the slides that we shared today. So you break it down to washrooms, kitchens, door openings. It's all well documented. The next step is getting in and getting to the elevator. And then lastly, it could still be overwhelming and everybody is a different type of learner. So just keeping it on documentation might not be helpful, which is why I believe all three panelists are readily available to support anybody's build. Personally, what I've done is I've designed, I don't have a design fee. I'm not a fee-based business. So I design everything essentially pro bono as long as I have the time. So if you have a general schematic, send drawings, markups work really well efficiently. And that's usually how it works. So there's more than enough content and then making ourselves available to cater to the first project that anybody's looking to do, whether fee-based or not, is probably the way to go.
That's great, Guy. And just quickly, where are your homes available? We had a question come in the Q&A where.
Yeah.
So where are these places?
We're almost entirely at occupancy. So we have two homes in North York. So you visited one of them. The other one is just about to become available. And then we have so that would be a roughly what we call apartment doors. So that's 8 apartment doors, and we have 15 apartment doors of accessibility in Hamilton. So basically 8 in Toronto, 15 in Hamilton. And then we do have a design concept for land that we're currently in the acquisition mode on, to build 6-story wood of accessibility. So that's our next frontier.
Right on, right on. Marco, do you want to answer that one? Where do developers start?
Yeah, happy to. I think building the awareness and getting informed really is the first step. And I congratulate everyone who's part of the call here today for kind of taking that first step. I think a next kind of logical one would be getting connected to others that have a similar mindset around building for accessibility. And I think the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition, as part of the Urban Land Institute is a really great way to kind of get plugged into a number of different contexts as well. And I think through there's a number of tools that are available through the ULI Accessibility Toolbox. And within that, there's context to professionals and to organizations such as the three of ours and many others who are more than happy to share their knowledge.
Thanks, Marco. Yeah. Lorene, you and I have worked together for so long, and we've had many conversations about this question, many discussions about this question, where do people start? And I know that human space is all about bringing people together from different living experiences. And, Nevin dropped in a comment here, which I think speaks to that. Nevin, Mike Carter through Nevin. We do need to listen to disabled folks. Could you share a little bit about your experience on your journey working in this space? What does that look like, and how does it help? How does it help begin this important journey to make sure that a space really is designed with accessibility in mind and meets needs for as many people as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, certainly there's a lot of standards and recommendations, and anyone can really, it takes time, but you can go through them and you understand them. But what we're learning over time is there's elements for refinement, elements for doing even some of these basic requirements better. And we've really only learned that through the consultation, through the post-occupancy phase of projects where something's designed to meet a standard, but if it was ever tweaked so slightly, it would be that much better. And so learning from that professional lived experience has been invaluable to the work we do, because a lot of times these are sort of low cost strategies. We just need to be specific and deliberate with how the detailing is developed over time. I think in terms of our journey together, we're beginning to understand the range of accessibility strategies and the research, especially around designing for neurodiversity and neurodivergence is coming more to the forefront. And so, when we, at least our team, and it's, certainly in the projects that are shown here, accessibility really needs to consider the broad spectrum of our abilities and the changes that can happen over time. And from there, we can be more deliberate about, what we mean when we're designing accessible spaces.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm guessing there's been some challenges along the way working with clients that may be pushing back on some of your suggestions, this sort of misconception about extra costs. Has that been an experience that you've bumped up against over time, Lorene, Marco, Guy? Who wants to thumbs up or a nod? don't want to shame anyone, and the work that we're doing is all about inviting people into these important discussions, because it's okay that you don't know. It's all right. You may have never been exposed to this topic. You may not know someone in your immediate family or close connection within your orbit that lives with a disability, and that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're generously offering this important information to invite more people into this important conversation. And the pushback needs to be met with statistics and case studies and real world experiences navigating these tough discussions. And yeah, a Guy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean,
Quickly, do you want to speak to
yeah,
that?
I was going to say,
How do you navigate this?
well, we're in a unique, I was waiting because we're in a unique position where we're completely vertically integrated. So from design, I personally negotiate with all the trades and then so on and so, and that's why we sourced our own products. And in our presentation, our PowerPoints, you can see like from the nuances of the accessories on up. So my view, my philosophy, and we're very fortunate in that way, is really going back to first principles. Everything is on the table and everything's affordable to create these templates. And then over time, we drive it to the most efficient, scalable price possible. So I've found in our experience, like the only areas of consideration are washroom in terms of creating those two drains that you saw in Daniel's presentation, and the millwork that is quite similar at this point. So once you come up with the design on that, the CNC machines will cut it, the labor will understand. So it's all misconceptions. That's why our presentation is always based on releasing all the information. We want to release all the intellectual property we learn and our supply chain, because most of it, 95% of it is just misconceptions. It could all be achieved. I agree with the 1% difference, plus or minus how accessible you want the kitchen and what features you want it to have. And what does it cost to have a curbless shower as opposed to an acrylic base or a bathtub? Like those are real physical costs, but it shouldn't be material enough to affect a design of a build.
Thanks, Guy. Marco, I'd love to know why. Like, why is Daniel's sharing this information? This is really valuable. A lot of time, energy, effort, investment has gone into this. What's the motivation behind sharing it?
It's a great question, Luke. And it actually segues nicely, I think, to the previous question, which maybe I'll circle back to at the end. So within our organization here at Daniels, our kind of guiding purpose statement is that as a company, we exist to build inclusively, to build sustainably, and within these communities that we find ourselves working within, we want to help to create a better future for all. And I do truly think that for all of us at Daniels, we do believe that building truly accessible homes is the right thing to do. And I think very simply, that's why we're doing this. And so in sharing our technical standards publicly, our hope is that this can be helpful for those who are looking to start their own accessibility journey, but maybe don't necessarily know where to start. And I think in leading by example, we just want to demonstrate to those within our industry that, accessibility isn't a secret competitive advantage that we figured out and we want to kind of have behind closed doors, but rather a shared responsibility for all of us in this industry. And so I think we've been fortunate in the trades that we work with, the consultants that we work with, our many partners on various projects that, they're all on kind of varying journeys, but we're in a unique position, I think Guy mentioned, where we are able to advocate for accessibility. And throughout these different stakeholders within the process, I think we're able to find a way to kind of bring them alongside and help them to see the importance of the work we're doing.
Well, thank you all. We're closing in on 1 o'clock here. So I really, again, appreciate all of your contributions, your organization's efforts and energy and investment in this important work. I'm going to pass it over to Heidi. But before I do, there's some questions that have come in about the slide deck. The presentation will be available, and the recording, yes, will be available as well. Pass it over to Heidi. Thanks again, Guy, Marco, and Lorene.
That's great. Thanks, Luke. And on behalf of ULI Toronto, I want to, of course, thank our moderator, Luke, and all the speakers. If you aren't yet a member of the AAC, we would love to hear from you. Check out the coalition pages on ULI Toronto's website. And you could read more about what Daniels and Penguin Living are doing at the links in the chat once again. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and you could check out, I think it's on the next slide, these upcoming events. All right, thank you very much.